So, I decided not to do this live because I figured, one, with how shy you guys typically are and how much interaction this really needs to be live, that I would just show you my process of paraphrasing and showing the tricks that I would use, and then I would like you guys to give me a paraphrase of one of the other ones I don't paraphrase on this list as your for credit. So I will let you know how you do on it once you email it to me, but I just want you guys to be able to practice. So I'm going to turn you down so you can see my process for paraphrasing. Okay guys, so you'll have this email to you, but I wanted to show you a little bit of the process that I think of when I paraphrase. And so to paraphrase is to keep the essential information, but try to either condense or put it into your own words. So if we take example number 1. The Antarctic is a vast source of cold on our planet, just as the sun is a source of our heat, and it exerts tremendous control on our climate, Jacques Cousteau told the camera. The cold ocean water around Antarctica flows north to mix with warmer water from the tropics, and its upwellings help to cool both the surface water and our atmosphere. Yet the fragility of this regulating system is now threatened by human activity. From Captain Cousteau. And this, of course, gives the source information. So as you can already see, I've circled things that repeat or that are similar to each other. So cold, cold, cool. Antarctic, Antarctica. We have, where was it? This regulating system control. And we have warmer and heat. Okay. So now if we look at the important things that we have to keep, and then we can also condense them down together. So we need to make sure that we reference how the cold ocean water comes from the Antarctic. Like most of the cold ocean water comes from the Antarctic. So it's getting those two sentences right there. And mixes with warmer water from the tropics. And this helps to cool the surface of the water, our atmosphere, and helps control our climate. However, this control or system we would find a synonym for regulating. So human activity, however, is threatening the precarious nature of our climate. So this is me saying the same thing essentially that this says, but in different words and condensing as much as possible. That's what paraphrasing should do. Sometimes you'll find that in complex text, in order to understand all the nuances of jargon and whatnot, it might actually be longer than your original section, but it helps and begins analysis in connection with whatever you're arguing or analyzing. Okay, so let's see the full paraphrase. And here you can see I got even shorter if you can read my handwriting. According to Cousteau, the Antarctic regulates our climate because the cold ocean water mixing with the warm cools the water's surface and the atmosphere, which is threatened by human activity. And I ended up making that all one sentence. So this is kind of like sentence combining again. You were just trying to condense information to as streamlined as possible and in your own words. Usually simpler is better. Let's try another one. So you can see this one's rather long too. So number 2. The 20s were the years when drinking was against the law, and the law was a bad joke because everyone knew of a local bar where liquor could be had. They were the years when organized crime ruled the cities, and the police seemed powerless to do anything against it. Classical music was forgotten while jazz spread throughout the land, and men like Bix Beiderbecke, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie became the heroes of the young. The flapper was born in the 20s, and with her bobbed hair and short skirts, she symbolized, perhaps more than anyone or anything else, America's break from the past. And then our source material. So let's look at the things that I once again circled. We have the 20s and we have the 20s. The law, crime, police, music, jazz, flapper, and names of specific musicians. These are all rather drawn out repetitive, and we can do some condensing here. So let's look at my paraphrase. So in the 20s, the prohibition was seen as a bit of a joke because people could still buy alcohol down at the local pub, allowing organized crime syndicates to establish themselves. It also gave rise to musicians like Bix, Louis, and the Count, and we saw the birth of the flappers with their short skirts and hair. Now, I hit each one of those things pretty much in its entirety, but I took out all the extra words that I could. I condensed as much as I could. Okay, so out of the next 3, I want you to pick one of them and do the same thing. Send me a paraphrase. Now, before I let you go, I do want to exemplify one of the more difficult ones that we have. Now, this is going to help when you, again, reach those really complex texts, when you take philosophy and psychology and some of the more dense pieces of work, when you get into the really specific jargon heavy doctorate stuff. You're not going to understand everything that they say. So, your purpose here is to clarify a poem, a complex philosophical passage, or prose filled with figurative language. Your paraphrase will be long, maybe even longer than the original. Here's an example. This first is a passage from British philosopher Bertrand Russell's A Free Man's Worship. As you read Russell's passage, underline words or phrases you find confusing. Restate the author's words and ideas as best you can. This will show your interpretation of the paragraph. And then I say we will compare in class, but we're not going to. So I'm going to read this out loud, and then I'm going to start showing you how I break it down piece by piece, and then I will read you my paraphrase. So for man, condemned today to lose his dearest, tomorrow himself to pass the gate of darkness, it remains only to cherish, ere yet the blow falls, the lofty thoughts that ennoble his little day, disdaining the coward terrors of the solve to fate, to worship at the shrine that his own hands have built, undismayed by the empire of chance, to preserve a mind free from the wanton tyranny that rules his outward life, profoundly defiant of the irresistible forces that tolerate, for a moment, his knowledge and his condemnation, to sustain alone a weary but unyielding Atlas, someone bearing a heavy load as Atlas did, holding up the sky on his shoulders, the world that his own ideals have fashioned despite the trampling march of unconscious power. Now, the best way to go through this is, as I would say, comma by comma, or piece of punctuation by piece of punctuation. So if we look and practice a little bit before I read mine. For man, capital M, man, means humanity. So for humankind, pretty simple start. Condemned today to lose his dearest. So condemned means that you are cursed, essentially. It is inevitable. We know that people lose loved ones, so people are going to lose their loved ones through their life. You're going to lose your dearest people. Usually we think of the dearest as our parents or children or significant others. Our next one is a little bit longer, goes from here to here. So, tomorrow himself to pass through the gate of darkness. So if we lost our dearest, that means they have died today. That means we have grief today. But eventually, we are also going to pass through the gate of darkness, or we are going to die as well. It remains only to cherish. So the only thing left is our happy memories, the things we can remember about them. The people who are left behind is the only thing that really remains. Ere yet the blow falls, but we're all going to experience this loss and this death. The lofty thoughts that ennoble his little day. So we're all going to grieve, even amongst the happy thoughts of things like, oh, well, they're in a better place. Little memories and smiles that they had with each other, reminders and whatnot, are going to make them feel better a little bit, but ultimately we are going to still feel that grief and still circle back to it. So the next little section, disdaining the coward's terrors of the solve to fate. So disdaining means to dislike very greatly or hate. So he hates people who he thinks are cowards and how they try to make themselves feel better, a solve, about how terrifying or how scary death is, because we're all fated to die. So he hates people who are afraid of death because it's going to happen to us all. To worship at the shrine that his own hands have built. So, to worship goes back to this grieving process and this remembrance process. The shrine that our own hands have built. What things do we build in our lives? Well, we build relationships. We build homes. When we go places and have memories, we bring trinkets and stuff back with us. We have photographs. These are our shrines that we build to our lives. They are our estates. They're what we leave behind. Undismayed by the empire of chance, so he is not bothered by what's going to befall him in his death, because he knows he's going to die. To preserve a mind free from the wanton tyranny that rules his outward life. And so because he's not afraid of death, he is able to act differently than other people who are enslaved to it. So he has a free mind. He is able to think differently. He's able to behave differently. And he is therefore not succumbing to the conformity of the rules other people say we should have in our life. And what have I talked about all semester about what it means to be successful? This is the 40-hour work week, the having the expensive car, the house with white picket fence, 2.5 children, the dog, the great job. All these things are what he thinks of as distracting ourselves from the inevitability of our death by giving us something else to focus on, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Right, profoundly defiant to the irresistible forces that tolerate. So he is rebelling that irresistibility, the things that make people feel better. Because right now, he knows that he is damned to die and to be alone. Very much like every person is going to have to die alone. We experience that by ourselves. Much like a weary but unyielding Atlas, who is a mythical character, the one who held up the sky on his shoulder. He's the one that holds the world up. And it feels like our lives feel like we have the weight of our world on us because we are, again, the center of our own universe. And so it's very daunting to make sure we do what we think we should do with our life in the fleeting moments that we have life. All right, and then the world that has its own ideals have fashioned despite the trampling march of unconscious power. So he feels like he is the only one that believes this, and he feels the pressure to conform, but he wants to do things that he deems worthwhile instead of confining himself to this idea of what normal is. He just keeps pushing forward instead. So let's look at my paraphrase. You're going to see essentially what we just talked about here in slightly different words in my voice because I sound like a pompous asshole, so bear with me. Mankind suffers the loss of their loved ones and falls into despair or grief. But we remember our lost ones fondly to get through our days, wandering around our homes looking at the trinkets and the lives we built together before we too die. However, Russell hates the cowards who allow the idea of death to hinder their lives and keep them from living or experiencing life, because we could die at any moment. But he is not affected by the thoughts of death, and he will not live the life everyone deems he should, the house with a white picket fence, 2.5 children, and a 40-hour work week. Instead, he remains defiant of the looming inevitability of death that burdens people with a weight similar to Atlas's, and he pushes forward, living in the means he deems worthwhile, regardless of the pressures to confine himself in the march of normalcy. So all the things that I just said, and this is about as long as the original, but it uses words and context that we can relate to understand what he's getting at in a larger, more abstract idea, which is why we use figurative languages to understand abstract ideas. And then this is what helps transition and translate throughout time, is our ability to look and dissect piece by piece and create new meaning. So this is paraphrasing. Send me your one small paraphrase in the email for credit. And yeah, I'll see you later, guys. Bye.